Jim worked on from wanting.
Everyone sit down.
I can't see anybody, you're all in the dark for me here.
We are here.
Okay, but before we start the Q&A, Brian just wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, it was very interesting just to see that. I've only seen that before on a little small screen, to see it on the big screen. When I was young, I was really intrigued to read about the Disney animators that did Pinocchio. And in particular, they said that the man that was in charge of the character of Geppetto was a young man when he animated it. And because you know, the animators would look into mirrors to get facial expressions, as he got older, he began to look like Geppetto. And so I was a young man when I did the first film, but looking at that, I realised I've turned into one of my characters.
I guess carrying on from that, really, I mean, how did it feel coming back to Froud? I mean, I think it's, what, 37 years? I mean, was it something that you always felt that you'd go back to, or did you just sort of thought that was in the past?
I've been trying to retire, so when this raised its ugly head, I think is one of those phrases, seeing all those characters. I was intrigued but also excited. We've been trying to get this going for many years, and so over the years I've designed more characters and more things from this project. But each time it was either going to be maybe you know, an animation or something, but never really puppets again. And we sort of rather abandoned hope that we could really do it. And it was only, which I call the genius of Netflix, said, well, why can't we just do it as puppets? And I can remember having a conversation with the workshop on the phone in California, because we knew this was hovering in the background and whether there's a possibility, but there was a moment when Pete phoned me and I thought he was ill because there was something wrong with his voice. But what's wrong? And he said, Netflix says they want to do it. And we both went, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? Because we knew the enormity of what we needed to do to bring this back to life again. And indeed it's mentioned there that it was 5 years of my life originally, and we only had just under a couple of years to do this, to fit all that work into that short space of time.
Was that daunting when you started? I mean, because at least on Peg put it, it's like five movies, and you see more of the world. There's more characters.
Yes, I mean, and also I think what was interesting that the writers and the director didn't get the memo about what puppets do, because I kept saying they don't do anything. In fact, in the first couple of weeks when we were filming, I was going around and telling them, they say, you know, puppets do nothing. And they would laugh at me, and very quickly they came back to me and said, you were right, weren't you? Because they don't do a lot, but because Louis didn't get the memo, he pushed them into things that we never imagined. There's a great story about David Odell, who was our original writer for the first film, and Jim Henson being on Hampstead Heath, and Jim was explaining about the new film we were going to make, which was Dark Crystal, and saying we were going to have puppets that did everything, things that people had never seen before. And Jim paused for a moment and said, well, except for walking and running, of course. And so that's always the biggest problem. But in this series, you see them do things that we couldn't imagine was possible.
I mean, for you, when you're sort of you coming to design this one, I mean, obviously technology has moved on lots, and we saw a lot of things in that documentary where you had people in blue suits that they could digitally remove. I mean, does that change how you design? You go about designing?
Yes, because originally most of my designs was about how we hid things. Either it was costuming that hid people on the inside, or hiding arm rods, but there's still an aspect of that. However, we didn't have to do that anymore, because that is the big breakthrough for us, I think, is that we didn't have green screen, and now we do. And so it meant that we could puppeteer from the outside, and so the character you've seen there, the major one we did was Law. So we've gone back to an old technique, which is bunraku, Japanese way of puppeteering, where you see the puppeteers, and we could do that, but what it does is actually engages the puppeteer directly to the puppet, and so we get much more dynamic movement, and the creature is much more expressive. And that, I think, to me, is one of the most exciting things. So in our modern technology, we've gone back to something that's really ancient way of puppeteering.
And obviously, with that sort of passage of time, and that you can achieve more, I mean, did you ever have to sort of pull yourself back in the designs to say, I mean, to keep it consistent with what you've done before?
Well, yes and no. I mean, one of the things that I do is I have to be part of a team, and so in the original film, and indeed in this one, I've got to supply everybody with the language, and so to inform the sculptors and the people that make the costumes about what I mean, what the world is, what it's made up of, this bits and pieces and stuff, and it's all got to be part of the same world. And so when we have set designers, they've got to create they've got to create a world that's consistently the same. And so it's no good me sitting on it, and what I want is people to contribute and to keep expanding the world. And so I think the fascinating thing, I'm going to talk about Law again, I think, he was the one that caused the most problems in this, which was interesting, because originally they started to design it as CGI with other designers, and I sort of objected to this, and I said, but it's got to look like my world. I mean, look like a world that I've been part of, and so it was a battle went on to be truthful about it, and then I started to design. It's fair enough they didn't like my design, because Louis was really trying to push it into an area maybe I wasn't quite understanding, and so I did lots of more designs, and you see some of them on the screen. There's a whole series of designs that I did, but they were still moving towards it just being CGI, and I thought philosophically we really needed it to be a puppet, even though it would move into another dimension with using CGI. And so it came, they presented the CGI stuff, and my point when I looked at it, and to them I said, well, where's the character? And everybody knew what I meant. It wasn't there. And so we took my last design and we started to build it, and that's what you see. The Law is my last design. And in the middle of starting on that, because I was so riled up about it needing to be a puppet, I did a series of drawings of a hamburger. And I said, look, if a hamburger looks like this, but you could make a great puppet, not only a great puppet, but it could be a puppet with lots of personality. And in fact, you can see there's a lot of hamburger in Law, but the most exciting thing is that when we did it for real with the puppet, when the CGI guys got involved, they totally understood how to bring this to life using their CGI. And the astonishing thing is, they mentioned it there, is that they actually did a CGI puppeteer to get the movements right. And this has been one of these things. I have a friend of mine who's a puppeteer, and over the years since like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, often on a Sunday we would have Sunday lunch, and then we would rail against the world and whinge about things, and whinge about the fact that people aren't using puppets in films anymore, and they just want to do CGI. And CGI is wonderful, but sometimes it's a bit it's very loose, it's very squashy, and it moves around a lot and unbelievable. And our theory was that if you did a puppet first and you base the CGI on puppet, which has limitations, it grounds it, it would be a winning combination. And we are both so delighted when we're looking at this Netflix thing, is that we think we're right, we think we've proved our point now. And I just want to finish about the Law thing, is that it's wonderful to see it as a character, to see it move and emote. Years ago, Jim Henson came to see me. I live on the edge of Dartmoor, and he fell in love with the landscape, and he said, I want that feeling of this landscape in the film. And we got some of that in the original Dark Crystal. It's a bit drier in the film than it is where I am. However, there are these tors, these big mounds of rocks, and Law is based on that. And so we finally, I think, made a character that Jim Henson wanted in the first film. We've got it now in this series.
When you're creating a character like, Law's, I think, a good example, how much of it's sort of chicken and the egg in terms of when the writers come in, because they'll have all these ideas and you kind of have to work out what that is, and then obviously you'll throw that, what you decide will kind of feed into what they write. So how does that work?
It's hard. I mean, in the original film, I mean, there are obviously some characters that Jim wanted in the original, but a lot of things I designed are based on what a puppet can do. And so character came from limitations. A character would come from a movement you could do, with a bit of stick on a rod. And so if you work that way, it means all your characters are always strong, because they always do the thing that they can do. But when it's written from the outside, which a lot of this was, because we were expanding the world, and the world of Froud has been expanded over the years by comic books and novelizations, and lots of characters have been written into that everybody wants to see that on the screen. So it makes my life more difficult, because as a designer I want the writer to say, that there is not a spider, but a spider-like creature, and where I can design something that might have some attributes of a spider but isn't a spider. And so it's a bit tougher now, but we snuck some things in there. Because one of the things, as soon as we said we were going to make this, I said, well, what we're going to do first is set up a workshop and make creatures. Which sounds a bit odd because this is full of creatures, but what I meant is all the little creatures that populate the world. And they didn't do that. We had to work hard to get all the Skeksis and Gelflings done, and then we were really close to filming, and they suddenly said, well, where are the little creatures then? Well, we didn't have time to do that. But so Wendy Froud came into the workshop, and we were often there at weekends, working, just like the three of us, the three Frouds together, making this movie. And so Wendy, we would find bits and pieces in the waste paper bins. They were the bits of leftover rubber arms and heads, and we'd look at that, and I'd say, well, try turning it upside down, and Wendy would snip and glue things back together again, and I would go around the set and steal bits of plastic, grass and plants, and we'd glue it all together and spray it and turn them into creatures. In fact, some of those creatures are stars in the exhibition here, and they had the spirit of the old days of working with the Muppets, about how we would like cobble things together with some fur and feathers and just sort of have fun making things and bring things, inanimate things, to life. And so we would bring it on Show Louis for the morning of shooting, and there's something that we had just built to go in the background somewhere, and Louis would love it and said, oh, I think I'll put it in the foreground. So a lot of our little, what we thought throwaway stuff, became stars.
So there was something I thought was very interesting in the documentary that you said about how you sort of start drawing lines and it kind of forms, and you don't necessarily have a sort of the image in your head before that. So I'm going to ask you about that and how that works, because you've also said that you kind of know what's right and you see what someone else has done. Is that right for the world? So kind of how does that work? So is it like you sketch and you suddenly think, I've hit it, or is it more?
Yeah, that's a really good question, a really tough one to answer. It always fascinates me drawing lines, and I could you're trying to draw something, and I'm on the 20th time I'm drawing this line, and I'm going, it's got to be right at some point, and then suddenly it is right, and I can't figure out what makes it right. There's something inside, a voice sort of says, the creative voice says, that's right. And once you get that one line right, everything else has to go around it. Everything now has to fit around it somehow, so it becomes part of the same thing. And it's something to do with rhythm, or it's something very abstract. And so when that is then moved on to when we're making things for real, it is problematical, because you've got to give people the freedom, the creative freedom, to be contributing, and yet you can't allow them just to be about them. It has to be about the bigger thing, which is the character and the world, and to get them to be part of that, speak the same language. And so it's finding the moment where to interfere is the wrong word, but like finding a way of guiding it, because it doesn't mean that I am right, because I'm often wrong, but there's times when I'm more right than wrong, and that's what I want to show up on the screen. It's no good. I don't want any big sore thumbs sticking out. Talking of which, when at the beginning of all that there was the mystic on there, and I'm looking at it, and all I can see is a blooming great seam line on his finger. And I go, well, that's the terrible thing about knowing about these things, is that you do see all the mistakes.
You were just talking about when you were making all those small creatures with Wendy Froud and Toby Froud. Do you find that you have a shorthand, and that because you know each other well, and you kind of get the world in a way that perhaps someone separate wouldn't? Yes,
absolutely. I mean, because Toby's obviously grown up with us, and he was the baby in Labyrinth, and so he was used to being surrounded by puppets, and also the strange, ugly goblin ones. So he was never fazed by that, and he's then went on to become a sculptor, and has worked on in film and making things. But his love is puppetry, and so this was his a dream job for him to really, to come in. And I had a heart attack, so I wasn't really wanting to go anywhere. So I wasn't going to go to California to help there. So I was at home. But so he became my eyes and ears to give voice to my vision there, because he, as he says, you know, he's versed in all things Freudian. Actually, thinking that because the Freudian came up, and I remembered, as far as we know, the first time the word Freudian appeared in print was, in 1975 or something like that, and it was, I worked in Soho, and so did Ridley Scott, and I had a meeting with Ridley one day in his office there, and we talked about things, and then there was, a few weeks later, there was it could have been an SFX magazine, it was something like that.
A little bit old for SFX.
Oh, was it?
A bit early for SFX.
Oh, well, it was one of your ilk.
Yes.
And he talked about a project he was working on, and he said these people, spacemen, get out their spaceship on a planet, and the first thing they see is a Freudian creature. So that's the first time it was used. And we know what the film eventually was, Alien. Yeah.
All connected.
Yes.
Obviously, the Dark Crystal has an ecosystem unlike anything else. It's a completely alien world. There's no humans in it. I mean, for an artist, how freeing is that you're not bound to kind of what's here?
Really freeing. It's interesting because, you know, in the first film we had like basically two gelflings, and we've got you know, hundreds of them. Well, I say it's only 10. They move around a lot, but they all are different tribes, and so the challenge was to design the different tribes to make them different, and so like all things, there were sort of designations of what they should be like based on where they lived. And so there was a lot of work done on that, which I did basically ignore. I didn't really mean to, but I just felt it was too limiting, only because Thrar is a completely different world. It's not actually, it is not Earth. And so therefore everything is different. And so Jim's idea of Thrar is that everything's alive. And so that's why we have rocks that move and rocks that sing, and you can't tell what's alive and what is part of the landscape. And so I've always thought that everything you look at has every possibility of being alive. So costume is not made of cotton or wool, it's made of stuff. But it's not stuff that I really necessarily know exactly what it is. All I know it is have every potential of either glowing or talking or moving or being knitted on the inside by little creatures. But it has life. And so I designed all of this out of my head. Way back in the first film, a lot of the things were based on some of my paintings, and so there had been lots of research then, but now for this I thought I'll just make it up. and so it is all in the abstractions, it's all in the shapes and forms and the rhythms of everything, because everything is organic, but in those abstractions I've tried to separate out the tribes, so it's working on a subtle level. Well, that was liberating. But once I could get everybody on board of understanding, the makers of this thing, it was mentioned in the documentary is that at first everybody was, say, kindly tidying my drawings up, and so nothing was working. It all came back, and it was like, it's terrible. Like, it doesn't look like my stuff. And when I said to Toby, tell them I mean it, they went, oh, okay. And so that everything was asymmetrical. And once they understood that, what they produced was so beautiful. But we did help them along a little bit, because Wendy and I made a couple of Gelfling costumes on our kitchen table just to give them a clue about how these things should look and what the textures should be. because it's very difficult to design a costume for any puppet, really. You can't, it's not like fitting a Savile Row suit on it. It's the costume has got to give you so much information. It's got to tell you a lot about the personality and the character. So all the details is part of that. So we work really hard on that. But also, it is also functioning technically. Technically, it's usually it's still hiding something, and it's either going to hide something that is a mechanical thing, or it's hiding how we do it. And so, the more that a costume has some fluidity to it, that you're not locked down too soon about how it fits onto the creature, the better it is. Because it's only when everything comes together and we can look at it, we realise, oh, we need to hide something else here, I need to add another bit here, but the costumes have got to have that look that allows you to do that. And so, there's all these things, I mean, it was mentioned that you'll never believe how difficult it was, and it really was more difficult than you saw there to do this stuff. And so often it's very rare I could see a puppet together all in one piece. They're all in pieces all the time, especially the larger ones. And so get them to come together was only for fleeting moments, for technical reasons, and it all come apart again. And so often it could be the night before till we finally would see the final one, and then we go, ooh, now we know what to do. And so there were some wonderful moments working with Toby at 6:30 in the morning, you know, on our hands and knees in front of these things, gluing things on or aging things on, just doing the final finish to get it on screen for 9:30 in the morning. And that's the most joyful thing, I have to say, like working with my son Toby and literally getting our hands dirty, making this stuff, and often bleeding on it because there's be something sharp or something going on, and we end up bleeding on it. So I think I've discovered what really makes truly a magical puppet. It's a bit of blood.
I mean, the sketches are obviously a big part of this, and there were, as they were in the first movie, and there were a few sketches here that we didn't see in the Dark Crystal movie. Was that the fun thing to do? Because there were a few there where it looked like you were pushing the envelope of what could be done.
Yes, I mean, because we had to recreate some old ones, because most of them are in museums of some sort, or recreations of them. But so we had to rebuild those. But then to expand their universe was fun, and it was weird. I just found it sounds really odd. It's sort of easy. There's some designs show up in the documentary, and I just sort of sat there and drew these things, and they are the major characters, and there are really no alterations to what I do, because when I'm working well, what I'm doing is to create a feeling. It's an emotion in the drawing, and so we run with that little sketchy things, and now the real work happens in the build, in creating the shapes and forms to keep it looking and feeling like my design, and then the finishing, the putting on all the textures. There was some slight problems near the end, because everybody falls in love with the as they're looking at this stuff, as we're building it, because we use great materials, very expensive silks, and it's because you need something that drapes well, or you need things that move well. But it was always our intention to put some extra layers on it, and so some people got rather horrified as we were aging these things down. But it was the fun bit. Luckily, Louis, our director, loved it, so he was encouraging us to dirtied them down more. In fact, we had a lovely lady working on it who did some of the aging. So it's one of the best projects she's ever worked on. Everybody gets terribly excited working on this stuff because it is so much fun. I mean, it is so much fun. It's hard work. Everybody has to work late at night, but everybody gets so much out of it.
Did that change how just how it was for you in that when they made the first movie, no one knew what the Dark Crystal was. This was just this thing. Whereas 30 odd years later, there are people who are invested in it and also they feel a bit of ownership of it. I mean, does that change how you work?
No. No, it's always astonishing. I mean, when some of the comics came out, that the people would complain and say they can't do that. You know, there was a character Bunyip, I think, is in it, and like not Bunyip, you haven't done yet. And said you can't have that. We know what. You know, and I go, what do they know? We invented this world. We can do what we like. And also, people don't quite understand about where we're taking them on the journey. Because part of the fun is to have surprises, but everything is linked to each other. There's all sorts of reasons for things being certain ways. So we have a lot of fun just trying to fool people what's going on. But no, we do it. But because the fascinating thing I think was about the first film is that we made the film we wanted to see. We were a bit like horrified when people were, saying would it frighten children, or we didn't mean to frighten children, but we also weren't expecting it was just for children. We were expecting everybody to be watching it, and we wanted it to be exciting and strange and beautiful. And I think right now with the Netflix series, we've got something that finally people. I think the original film was ahead of its time. I think its time has come again. That people are more open to the possibilities of where you can, what stories you can tell with puppets.
It's a good time to open it out to questions from the audience. There is a microphone coming around, so if you want to put your hand up, just someone at the front here.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Froud. Sorry. Good evening, Mr. Prof. Take 3. Good evening, Mr. Froud. Just before I ask my question, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of fans, both old and new, here in the UK and around the world, who love what has been brought to the screen, a very big and heartfelt thank you. As someone who both worked closely with and inspired Jim Henson and realised his vision, in your personal opinion, would you say that Dark Crystal would not only have lived up to, but surpassed his expectations as a visionary?
Yes, well, thank you, but we definitely need to thank Jim Henson because it was his vision, and I was absolutely delighted that he asked me to help him on that. Over the years, when we talked about like wanting to do puppets again, people often said, "Well, great, Jim would have been really pleased with that. That's what he would have wanted." And I would say, "Well, I'm not so certain, really, because when we knew him, he was always looking at technology, always looking at something new." And he was always looking at something to bring to his storytelling, because that's what he was a storyteller. So, I think things would have changed or moved on. But however, this version of the Dark Crystal, I think, is astonishing, because this is really a really happy blend that we've gone back to the basics of puppetry. I think over the years that people have really enjoyed CGI, but there's something that we feel that something got left behind. And I think we prove what that is. There is something magical about using physical effects and things that are artistry, the artistry of a puppet, but then with the enhancements, which really just help tell the story. I think absolutely Jim would have been delighted by this. Well, I am, and I'm delighted to think that we're bringing his story back to life again. Because we, at the time, Jim was disappointed for the reaction to it. It wasn't quite as universally, liked or as you would have hoped, but he was always proud of it, and absolutely should be, because the most extraordinary thing over the years, when people talk to me about it, the film, is that how not. First of all, they tell me it frightened them, it scared them as children, but they always say, I did something. I followed art. I wanted to become a writer. Some even say they wanted to get into the film industry, but it was always a creative response. And I think this is going to do the same thing, even though there's some astonishing things in it that are technically, absolutely amazing, and you can't do that in your own bedroom. But I think people will go, I might try and make something. I think people will want to really be part of this world.
It's one over here and then one over there. Did that in the wrong order, sorry.
Hello. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between the character, the archer, or is it the mystic, and the hunter, because it seems like they're the same, they're connected. I was just wondering, when you were designing the characters, were there things that mirrored one another, or were they like negatives of one another?
I mean, they're all mirrors of each other, and so you always have to bear that in mind. But all that really had been worked out in the first film, because that was the big reveal, was that they really were two aspects of the same being, and so we don't have to cover a lot of that ground again. One of the things, though, we could do, because the hunter is very dynamic, and we wanted that. We knew we wanted a character, because the sketches are moribund. They're shutting down. We just thought we needed to have something that said there's still some desperate life in them, and we've always in Dark Crystal and in Labyrinth built creatures that are people in suits, but with puppet aspects going on. And I think the hunter in particular is, it's frighteningly amazing when he leaps around. But just as an aside to that, because they are aspects of the same character, anatomically, I had to work all that out in the original film. And so, here's a secret I'm going to tell you, so don't tell anybody else. Jim wanted originally my trolls in the first film, which became the Mystics. But they wouldn't give me a deal, and everything I drew they owned, which was fair enough. That was okay. So I said to Jim, well, I got to do something, but I'm not going to give you my trolls. And so I invented trolls with 4 arms. So it's a copyright issue, is the 4 arms. And so once we had the 4 arms for the trolls, when we came to do the Skeksis, they have 4 arms, which for a long time were sort of rather secret in the back carapaces. And we've been developing those over the years, whereas it becomes more and more. You see it in the first film briefly when the Chamberlain is stripped, and you can see anatomically they've got these other bits. And in the Netflix series, we really use these four arms to great dramatic effect. So it's fun to see something that we put in the first one to come into full fruition in this series.
Thank you. Just to say, I came back from my holiday just to come here this evening. So, my question is about, because I know your artwork and the paintings, and you were saying that you sometimes only see these puppets together just as they're being filmed. There must be so many decisions made by the voice artist and the director and the puppeteers in particular, working out the way these puppets are going to move, their personalities. But so much of that you must have in your head in that original art concept. Do you find that they generally resound as one, or are you ever surprised at the sort of creative choices that are made? Any work particularly well or not?
Lots of things in there. First of the beginning, I was there when I say that, only see it at the last minute. But I mean, I was there in the workshop. I had an office with a glass window that overlooked the rehearsal bit, so I was watching all this all the time. A lot of the movement for the Skeksis and the Mystics had obviously been worked out in the first film, and so when they came to life originally, I was absolutely amazed. It was beyond what I could have hoped for. I know on this one, I mean, when the puppeteers came in, they were so delighted about working on this project, but they were, and they do mention it in it, bless them. In those first days, they were very Muppety when they were rehearsing, and I would just squint at them and growl at them, and call them scum, and bless them, because what they weren't ready for was how difficult it was going to be, and it's really interesting that I mean, they were magnificent in the end, absolutely beautiful, but it was so hard for them in those first few days is to get out of their old style of puppeteering and moving into a realistic style, and it's so tough, and so they did more things than I could possibly imagine that a puppeteer could do. But it's arduous for them. But so I have no complaints whatsoever about. However, it was hard only because, as I mentioned before, a lot of these things have been designed in terms of story by writers, and so we were having to create things that had been written down in the hard, cold stone of words, and so bringing to life was a problem. But I would have wished to have designed more characters, and which there would have been time to play, because one of the things we did in the original film was just have the puppeteers together, and we would create ideas just by movement and what was possible. I mean, the Landstriders originally came from that, just playing around with people on stilts and that. And so I sort of missed that opportunity to incorporate what puppeteers can do best into a character. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
We've got time for one very, very quick one, I think. So just go there in the middle.
Hello, Brian. It was absolutely fascinating, the depth and the sort of magnitude and epicness of all the creativity that went into that. I wanted to ask about the matriarchal structure of the society and whether, sort of what the motivation was there for you, and the inspiration, and also your vision of what it will contribute, being watched now by society.
Yeah, well, the writers really ran with it, but and so a lot of it, wasn't necessarily part of the script writing. But what's fascinating is what's it called, the Wall of Destiny, which is it turns up in the original film where they find out all this information, and I designed that, and then somebody made it out of polystyrene, and there it is in the film. So unbeknownst to me, they had looked at that right at the beginning when they were writing this, and they noticed that right in the middle was a queen, which I put in. That was my just because I drew it and just made it up. And so absolutely delighted that they ran with that idea that it was matriarchal. The other thing in it was they were said that, your great idea for the tree, Brian, which was the big tree. And then I said, well, why does it do with me? He said, well, it was in the Wall of Destiny. I said, there's no tree in there. And they said, yeah, there it is. I said, that's not a tree, that's a castle. It's the castle. What's fascinating is that in the original film, I had to create a world that felt ancient. And so there's lots of shorthand, lots of things I did. I thought, well, as it's about transformation, there's all alchemical symbols and things, and then all the geometry. Because Jim Henson was really interested in, he loved England, he loved its ancient sacred sites, and he wanted some of that feel, and I just sort of kept feeding it in all the time into the designs and things based on geometry and threes and everything like that, just to give it an ancient feel. And so the little things that are almost like little time bombs that went into that now have come to fruition. You never know that's what's going to happen. And so it's wonderful that this is, it's like it is so weirdly timely, it seems, right now, this series, about some of the issues it's addressing, and also some of the issues that we can address because it's puppetry. That we can actually be stronger about some of the things that have been said. And so, hooray for the Dark Crystal.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I could have talked all night. But just a couple of things. In case you haven't seen the latest issue of SFX yet, it's on sale now, packed with massive Dark Crystal feature and loads of Dark Crystal goodies like postcards and stickers. On the way out, don't forget you can drink a little bit of Thar. A Stone in the Woods. The ale is available to over 18s on the way out, and possibly Gelflings. I don't know how they react to alcohol. But most importantly, I'd like to say thank you ever so much to Brian. It's been a wonderful evening, and thank you, Brian.